Welcome to the Clear the Shelf podcast with Chris and Chris, the show that meets at the intersection of education and entertainment to discuss online arbitrage, retail arbitrage, wholesale, and all facets of selling on Amazon. We'll bring you news, tactics, strategies, insights, stories, and interviews to help you grow your Amazon business. And now, here are your hosts, Chris Grant and Chris Racic. What's up, Amazon sellers, and welcome back to the Clear the Shelf podcast with myself and my Acumenous co-host, Chris Racic. There seems to be this dichotomy in the Amazon community. Either prep centers are the best thing since the invention of the internet, or if you use a prep center, you're giving up too much margin and you're an idiot. And there doesn't really seem to be a whole lot of middle ground. Now, my opinion is there's some nuance to it. I am a proponent of using prep centers, especially when you understand that they can actually save you money in certain cases. But I will admit that there are instances where not using a prep center is going to be ideal. Low profit items that maybe you want to merchant fulfill very, very quickly, or maybe you want to do a little bit of BOPUS. Or buy online, pick up in store for those of you in Ann Arbor. I also know that choosing the wrong prep center can put you in a world of hurt. I've seen it happen, unfortunately. Prep centers stop shipping. They stop communicating. Heck, I've seen inventory abandoned in fields in the middle of nowhere. Now, those are horror stories and they're outliers, but they are examples of why you need to be extremely careful about who you partner with. I didn't say do business with, I said partner with when it comes to handling your inventory. So today we've got the owner of a prep center, the prep center that I use, and my longtime friend, Charles Leslie, or Chaz, who runs Network Prep. And we're going to talk about what you need to do before choosing a prep center, how to find one, what questions to ask, and something I don't hear anybody talk about, how to be a good prep center customer. This way, and by doing this, you can run an Amazon business from anywhere. I've got friends who run Amazon businesses in the US from places like Colombia, Israel, the UK, Australia, and they get to take advantage of the US marketplace. Now, before we get started, you guys know the drill. It takes us minutes to prepare for this episode. So we'd like to make a little bit of an agreement with you, a digital fist bump, if you will. We make the episodes, and if you like them, do us a solid, hit the like button, hit subscribe, or leave a comment wherever you might be listening. The way that we can grow the podcast is to tickle the algorithms of whatever platform you're listening on. And the best way to do that is by getting you to interact with the show. All right, let's dive in. Chaz, what's going on, man? Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me on, guys. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. So before we dive into all the questions that we've got for you, I'm curious, like, what made you get into the prep space? I thought about it for about 30 seconds one time. And then I thought better of it. And so, like, was there a gap in the marketplace? Was there, something that you were personally unhappy with? Like, what made you jump into that?
Yeah. So the funny part with the prep center birth basically is we definitely never wanted to be a prep center. It just naturally grew into that role. So at the time, my wife Tristan and I, we documented our whole journey since 2015 on YouTube, showcasing us grinding out of our garage for the first 2 years, getting our first little 500 square foot office space, hustling Amazon, FBA, and eBay. And then 2019, late 2019, YouTube audience and Instagram people constantly hitting us up. Hey, do you recommend a prep center? Do you recommend a prep center? At the time, we had a physical neighbor, let's say, that opened up a prep center, and we firsthand got to witness the shady tactics that happen with a lot of these horror stories, unfortunately. So we naturally absorbed just one or two of those people just to help them out, get out of a bad situation as far as leftover inventory. And so we just had a small warehouse space at the time, 1,000 square feet. We had 2 part-time employees. This is late 2019. Got those first couple clients on board. At the time, they weren't considered clients. It was just, we're going to help get these guys inventory out, and then let them loose onto some other prep center. And so that's how it started. And then once we finished that job of a couple thousand units, it was like, well, is this an idea we can kick around? And then it kind of got put on the back burner. Just started doing our own selling after doing that again. And then 2020 comes around. We all know what happens in 2020. At the time, for those of us OGs have been around since then, Amazon FBA cut out the ability to actually go and ship FBA unless it was an essential category. So at the time, overnight, when I was focused on toys and electronics, overnight, my ability to ship FBA was gone. I could merchant fulfill. Obviously, we know the volume is not going to be quite the same. So that's when we were now stuck with, okay, COVID is here. Both of our part-time employees, of course, were just like, we're not coming in. We don't want to catch this, which was fair. We were so scared at one point that we heard that leaving cardboard in the sun will get rid of the germs, right? And so we were setting packages out front for a couple hours at a time. And so it's just my wife and I that all of a sudden we have free time. We have a small warehouse space and constant barrage of questions about these prep centers. And at the time, we just kept shooing people away. Like, unfortunately, we don't have any good prep centers without hearing the horror stories. And so from COVID kind of birthed the huge demand that we all saw in the e-commerce space. So with that demand came the word prep center even more and more. And so we finally were like, you know what? We've done a prep center job for those couple guys before. Let's just put a post out on Instagram and just take on a couple small clients and see what we can do with this. Our goal at the time, honestly, was just to pay the overhead on our rent, which was, I think, $1,100 a month. So in my head, I'm like, if we do $1 a piece for prep and then we just make 1,000 bucks per month, that covers our overhead, and then we're good. And that's how it started with the first couple clients. And then they had friends that wanted to use us as a prep center. And at the time, we still were not considered a prep center. And so when the back half of COVID finally happened and our staff was able to come back, all of a sudden it's like, well, we've got this new operation in play and I'm getting tired of doing the prepping and shipping. Maybe I can have one of you guys help out. So we trained our first part-time person to come in and help with prep on another person's inventory, not just my own inventory. And then throughout the next 6 months, we had to go into a bigger warehouse. So now we had 2,000 square feet to play in. And then the whole idea of, okay, if we're going to do this, we've got to make this legit. So we need a brand, which is Network Prep was born with the original idea. We could dive into this topic as well. The original idea of Network Prep was to have a network of prep centers throughout the US that was all branded and ran the same way. So we were going to have an East Coast, West Coast, and Central. So we eventually did move down to Texas, and Oregon was up and running with full staff and an operations manager. My wife and I personally moved down to Texas, opened location number 2, which 2 years down the road, we finally ended up shutting that one down. So I'm happy to cover ins and outs and anything in between that time period.
Nice. So, I mean, it's kind of like a lot of entrepreneur journeys. It was,
Yeah.
you sort of backed into it like by mistake,
Yeah. Yeah. We definitely
yeah.
never went into it like, let's become a prep center. It just naturally kind of grew, and the supply and demand was definitely there. So it just kind of worked out in our favor. And then it was just at that point is when we learned to become true business owners and not just people flipping things online. And now
Mhm.
I know there's a distinction between, and I get flack when I say this, but if you are just selling things on e-commerce, whether it's Amazon, Walmart, eBay, it's not a true business. A true business has systems in place, SOPs. I didn't understand how to do anything at that point. At that point, I had dove into the book, The E-Myth by Michael
Great book.
Gerber. And this thing flipped my mindset so hard on running a true business, because in there, he just talks about most of us as business owners create a glorified job for ourselves. And then if you step out of the picture, does your business still run? Most of us that are just sellers can honestly say our business would come to an absolute halt if I didn't do the sourcing, I didn't do the shipping, I didn't do the admin work, the business would halt. So growing the prep center is ultimately what taught us how to run a real business with real systems, a real staff. And then when I came back into the selling portion of our business where we're at now, being full-time sellers again, I've now got this new information, this new framework of running a real business, so I can go into my own selling again with a completely different mindset.
Hey, Amazon sellers, are you tired of juggling multiple tools to manage your FBA business? Well, say goodbye to the chaos and hello to Boxum, the all-in-one software that streamlines your shipments, inventory, and profitability tracking in just a few clicks. With Boxum, you'll cut your shipment time in half, gain real-time insights into your business, and keep your inventory under control, all from one simple, intuitive dashboard. Don't waste time. Try Boxum today and take your Amazon FBA game to the next level. Check it out over at cleartheshelf.com/Boxum and start your 14-day free trial now. Let's dive in and talk a little bit about like the listener. And I want to start at the very beginning, because a lot of people, I get this question quite a bit. When does someone know when they're ready to start working with a prep center?
A couple different scenarios. First one is you've got the volume to support it. If you're doing, my threshold, I tell people, is roughly 300 units a month. Roughly 300 units a month. Most of our clients actually start with about 200, 250 maybe, and then they use us and realize, oh, I have all this extra time, I can source more, and then they ramp up the volume from there. That threshold in unit count is roughly 300. The average person I've spoken with, every client we bring on, I usually ask them how many hours a week they're prepping, so I can then showcase them, like, how would you like to have those 10 hours back? And 10 hours was around the average. 8 to 10 hours per week is what the average person is spending doing the prep and ship. And most people are not having a dedicated shipping day for themselves. Like, we run a very tight, consistent schedule where it's the same day every week for a shipment. I think, as most sellers, like I used to do, I would kind of just throw things in the garage. And then when it came time to do shipments, I'd poke at it for a couple hours and sort things, come back the next day. So you've got this mess that's in your space all week long until you finally close out that shipment. So most people, when they hit the point of the 200 to 300 unit range, or they are just absolutely capped on their time, that's when it makes sense. As long as your margin can absorb the fees, that's when it makes sense to start looking into the prep center side. As usually most of it's going to come down to time.
Interesting. So, okay, you said that most of the people you talk to are spending between 8 and 10 hours a week prepping.
Mhm.
Is Are those people doing the 2 to 300 units a month, or are they doing? Is it more volume than that? That typically
Those
takes
would
8 to 10 hours.
be more so like the 3 to 500 unit range. I'd say for
Okay,
those smaller accounts that are doing less than 300, you're probably looking at more like 5 hours a week, 4 to 5, somewhere in that
that's
range. And of course, it depends on the person, right? It might take one person, and also it depends on experience. Like, I've been at this for almost 9 years. So I like to think I'm fairly quick at a shipment. I could do several hundred units very quickly, versus it might take someone who's newer 5 or 6 hours just to do a couple
mhm,
hundred units. So that experience game definitely comes into it as well.
yeah. The reason I ask is because if we start to break it down by how much time am I spending, if I'm spending 10 hours a week and I'm doing, let's just say, 500 units a month, my cost per hour for my own time to prep, it really starts to not make sense to do it myself.
Hmm.
Especially if I want to pay myself like a CEO. I don't want to make 12.50 an hour. I
Yeah,
want to make 50, $100 an hour. And if I just value my time at $100 an hour, I'm spending $1,000 a week in payroll to
hmm,
prep my own stuff. I think I don't know. I think a lot of Amazon sellers and Walmart sellers, and they need to shift that mindset a little bit to start thinking, oh, sure, it doesn't cost me anything to prep my own products, but in reality, if I want to get paid the big bucks, it is costing me because my time is valuable.
exactly. And that's a mindset that takes most of us years to even wrap our head around, because especially when you're a new business owner in this field, yeah, I can do prep for free is how we view it. Or, if you hire staff, I can't tell you how many times I was so stubborn when we first started hiring staff for this whole operation that Trista and I were the only ones running inventory lab for like the first 6 months. We had 4 or 5 employees, but we only let them do prep, the actual box contents. They did everything except inventory lab, because inventory lab is one of those pieces, or any shipping software really, Inventory Lab is what we use currently, but we were able to finally get out of the mindset of like it's better for me to do it because I'm faster and I don't have to pay them to do it, right?
Mhm.
And then that same mindset had to happen one day where I'm like, wait, I'm spending all my time at this computer doing essentially minimum wage work. It's not a higher end skill set that we're talking about here. And that's when I realized, as a seller, I looked at my own account and realized, wow, I have not sourced in months. No wonder why I have no sales. Meanwhile, I'm at this computer running shipments every single day for the team. That was the first time that I had that mindset of I'm losing so much money by trying to do this the cheap way. And so I that's when we first started getting people on the computer. And the whole premise of like, I'm going to show you, you watch, and then you're going to do it. I'm going to watch, and then you just do it. And so that whole step by step training process happened, and it took months to get everyone fully up and running. And then we were able to pass off the responsibility to the team, and we no longer were that bottleneck. And I was able to go do the higher dollar amount activities like sourcing, which is the number one thing we all should be doing as sellers.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think shifting the mindset into what your time is worth, like
Mhm.
what's the value of the task that I'm doing versus what I want to be paid as this business owner. I think that's a level up,
It
as an
really is.
entrepreneur. Once you get
Mhm.
to that point, um, yeah, that really helps put things into perspective. And as far as a prep center goes, with an Amazon seller, that math is easy.
Mhm.
You
Mhm.
you know exactly how much time you're spending, and you can decide on the number that you have determined that you're worth, and it becomes an easy decision from there.
It really
Um,
does. And that's honestly part of the reason why we ended up shutting down the Texas location, because we're in a position down there where it was Tristan and I full time, 40 hours a week. And then we had a couple part timers when we needed them to help prep. And we just, anyone who's ran physical staff will understand this. We had no desire to have a full team down there. It's a lot of work to manage a team. Without getting the higher level person would be an ops manager. Like we have here, we have our gal Jamie, and she runs everything through here. She's an absolute rock star, and she started with us back in our garage days, taking photos for eBay stuff.
Hmm.
The customer returns, the clothing Trista was sourcing on the weekends. Jamie was in there a couple days a week, and that was 8 years ago. And so throughout that journey, she got into, okay, let's get you on prep, and then let's get you trained on doing the inventory lab side. And then, hey, we're going to move. Do you want to become the person in charge? And that was a whole extra training process that had to happen. Get down to Texas, and we realized very quickly, like, we do not want to run a full staff anymore. So being on the tables 30, 40 hours a week each, and going through that mindset flip again of like, what are we doing here? And our overhead was very high in that location, was 7 grand a month
Hmm.
after all expenses. That's before we pay ourselves a dime. That's just a break even. So at 70 cents for prep, which is what we were doing down there to offset sales tax and stay competitive with a lot of other prep centers in those states. We had to do 10,000 units at 70 cents a piece just to break even. And so that mindset again was, what are we doing here? This is not worth our time. And the flip side is we just don't have a desire to run staff down here. That's a whole nother year process to get a ops person in charge running their own team. And we just have no desire for it. So we eventually came to that conclusion of like, we've got to realign the business to fit our lifestyle goals. And that's where that just was recently, that was 2 months ago. So we've been through quite a transition this year with everything.
Hmm.
so getting back to the hypothetical seller trying to decide,
Mhm.
uh, you know, to get a prep center or not, and say they're leaning towards getting a prep center. Um, Now we know Chris has a great resource online, but and obviously this is a great place to lean on your network. Um, but from the prep center owner's perspective, uh, how should a seller go about securing a prep center? What are the questions to ask, and what should they be looking for?
Yeah. So number one, and it's funny, Chris brought up seeing packages left in a field. We probably saw the same photos of that
Mhm.
situation. It's a real thing that happens out there. It's not as common now. I feel like it's had its burst of these mom and pop prep centers that pop up, and they're being run out of trailer homes. They're run out of garages. We've seen it all by now. We've seen the photos. We've seen videos of this real stuff going on. And then the horror stories of like, hey, they've got $30,000 worth of my inventory. They haven't replied back in 3 weeks. It's just, you've got to ask the right questions, make sure you're not going to run into these types of situations. Not as common, but they do still happen. Number one is, do they operate out of an actual commercial space? Whether it's a office space that's in a strip mall or they have a dedicated warehouse, but asking the first question is, where is this run out of? Nothing wrong with doing this type of service out of a trailer home or a garage or a spare bedroom, as long as there is open communication and transparency there. We have two clients technically in Texas that we kept on because it makes sense for us, and the prep is super quick and easy. We can literally do it out of the garage. But that was a conversation like, hey, are you cool if we do this out of the garage moving forward because we're getting rid of the warehouse? Make sure we're carrying the commercial, the actual insurance policy on that. All that plays a big role as long as there's transparency. That situation is fine. So first question, what type of space do they have? Commercial is probably going to be a safe bet no matter where that's at. Second is going to be, do they carry insurance? Because sadly, it's not a requirement necessarily as a prep center to be having extra insurance in case there's theft. If there's God forbid, there's a fire going on inside the warehouse and all the inventory is toast, we want to make sure you're able to get a payout from that. So asking about insurance is a huge one. Aside from that, you want to also dive into the communication. If they run just emails, I am going to tell you right now that is red flag, because it's way too slow and way too clunky, and emails can get lost very easily. So if we're talking about doing your shipments, and I need as a person doing your shipment, if I need to ask a question, maybe something is damaged, this ASIN doesn't match. Hey, you said this was a 2-pack, but that listing shows as a 3-pack. We need to ask these questions. And if we're doing this back and forth email thing, way too slow. We personally use Slack, so it's instant communication with whoever's getting taken care of. So, for example, I'm actually the one that did Chris's shipment here last week, and so I was able to message Chris a couple of questions, and then boom, able to answer back. Done. Shipment's complete. Very easy, very quick. We want to make sure that you have open communication going on. Second is turnaround time. Now, with online arbitrage, the tough part is you'll see websites advertise 24 to 48-hour turnaround time. But we're talking from an arbitrage perspective, that 24 to 48-hour turnaround time is good to have in place if you're talking about larger batches or pallets. So if I have 3 or 4 pallets of inventory coming in, yes, there's a 48-hour turnaround window to get that done. But if we're talking online arbitrage where you only have 10 units that came in from Target today, we're not doing a shipment with just 10 units tomorrow, right? That's not going to make sense for you as a seller. So we typically put everybody on a once a week shipping schedule. So for example, if your shipping day is Mondays, every Monday, whatever was delivered throughout that last week, whether it was, we try to have a minimum in place of about 50 to 75 units to make sense for your shipping. And so as long as that minimum is in place, we'll do batches of 100 units. We'll do batches of 1,000 units, depending on the client. And that's once a week. So you want to ask about turnaround time or whatever shipping schedule they follow. Some prep centers are going to have you just tell them when you want a shipment because you have enough delivered. Other prep centers like ourselves, we prefer to stay on a consistent schedule. And I think that's actually one piece that's not talked about with the power of that is the fact it keeps you accountable, because you don't want a message from our team, which we have to do, which says, hey, you don't have enough for a shipment this week. We'll check back next week. So that's a form of accountability. It's kind of like the first time I hired a virtual assistant to do my eBay listings for me. That kept me accountable now because I have to do the photos every day, or she's going to message me like, hey, do we have photos today? Oh, sorry, I put it off. Right. So I think that's another benefit of a prep center a lot of people don't talk about, is just you now have a partnership that's accountability, because the prep center is expecting a certain amount of units per month from you. And so it's going to help keep you consistent with the sourcing.
Yeah, that's a good point, because that's it's saying, you made the same point when you know, like throwing the stuff in the garage, you know, when you were talking about how you started it, you know, it tends to shorten the cycle too, you know. And not only is it accountability, it makes you more productive, and it shortens the turnaround time from the seller's perspective as well, you know, because it's just too easy to put it off another day, or
Yeah.
life gets in the way or something like that. But if you have the prep center going, all right, it's time to ship, and yeah, you're right, you don't want that message that there's not enough stuff.
Exactly.
So
And especially with online arbitrage, I mean, we know it's a game of speed. You got to be the first one on that listing, get it sold, or you got to wait until that tanking kind of levels back out. So it's definitely a game of speed. So most sellers, like you said, they're throwing things in their garage as they come in, and then they'll deal with it in a couple weeks. But by then, you might be stuck in like the price war, and you got to wait for people to sell out until you can get that price back up. So the game of speed and consistency is everything in this.
Mm-hmm. You've run prep centers in a tax-free state and a prep center in a state that charges sales tax.
Mm-hmm.
How does one choose which way to go? And are there any other benefits besides the tax arbitrage of using a prep center in a tax-free state?
So using one in a tax state is usually two scenarios. One, you're doing private label or wholesale, so you're not paying tax to that state. The other scenario is there's loopholes. Well, loopholes, we'll say that loosely, but you can get reimbursement from most states for the taxes. Some of them are just a hard no. You have to do some research on which state you're in. But in Texas, we can get sales tax reimbursement there. The problem is it can take 6 months, 8 months, or a year. And you got to fill out all kinds of paperwork, all kinds of documentation that goes on. So will most people do it? Probably not, because it's a pain and a headache, and you got to have this lag time. But that is one way that people have gotten around using a Texas specific center like ourselves down there because we work with online arbitrage sellers, and that's usually what they were doing is they were getting reimbursed, or they were finding out which categories are tax free. So for example, like supplements aren't going to be taxed. So we were dealing with quite a few online arbitrage supplement sellers. So there's a couple ways you can get around that. For the most part, the tax one is going to make sense. Really, any prep center is going to make sense if you're ordering from a specific supplier that you know is shipping out of a certain state that's close by. So, for example, in Oregon, we have clients that specifically have wholesale accounts in Washington and California. So it makes sense to use the Oregon location versus that same client can also have a supplier in like Florida. And so that makes sense to go to Texas or a Florida center in those scenarios. And then when it comes to the tax free, this is the part where, and I know Chris has brought this up several times in the past too, you can actually get free prep if you break it down. So for example, Texas is about 8% sales tax. So on a $20 buy cost, you're paying $1.60 to have that shipped down there to Texas. And then, of course, like California is higher than that, and there's other states that are a little bit lower. So do the math on your state. But if we're paying $1.60 in sales tax to have it go to Texas, sales tax free Oregon, we start our pricing at $1.65, which means you're now basically getting free prep done. And then anything over that is honestly just money back in your own pocket. So that's one aspect that's a huge benefit for the tax free.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm glad you brought that up, but I think that needs to be hammered home because I don't think a lot of people think about that. It just looks like a cost when they go to use a prep center. Oh man, I got to pay $1.65 to get each item prepped. Like there goes all of my profit. But the thing is with online arbitrage, if I were shipping that here and I have to pay that $1.65 in sales tax, I know that I'm never going to see that money back. I'm not going to take the time to do the paperwork and deal with the government and all of that stuff. So it's gone. And then I've got my time on top of that. And instead I can just ship it to a prep center, let it be tax free, pay them the money I would have paid the state anyway, and I get my time back. So it really becomes a positive in my direction. Yeah, not enough people think about that.
No. And like, I'm glad you brought up time because that's the number one benefit is the time. Like I said earlier, if the average seller is spending 5 to 10 hours a week doing shipping, like that's 5 to 10 hours extra. You could either be doing hobbies you love, spending time with your family, or sourcing more. One of those three buckets is most likely what you would rather be doing than doing your own shipping. And the coolest part too is we've worked with such a wide variety of people that are brand new sellers shipping 50 units per month. I've helped those guys get up to the 200, 300, 400 unit mark. And then we've worked with larger sellers that are doing millions of dollars. So we've seen this huge variety of different types of sellers, and those also come with different types of benefits. So we had one group of sellers that they were actually, I think the second shipment I ever did back in late 2019 as like that rough draft period. did their first shipment of 30, 40 units. And later on, they ended up bringing up a conversation a couple years down the road. They're like, hey, we're thinking about like literally going over to Europe for a year. And we want to keep our business going. Like, would you guys be willing to handle the rest of it? And this is during our baby growth mode. So we're not used to handling larger volume at that time. And so that forced us to get a couple more staff, a couple more systems in place, and really automate some things. And they were able to hand over all of their inventory to us, grew it to 1 million per year, and they were able to hang out in Europe for a year. And we handled 100% of that. So those kind of stories are just my favorite, because we're able to see somebody go from kind of a newer seller, just figuring it out, to eventually having a full scale operation. And the best part is, as an owner, their hands were not working in the business. They got to do the admin work, some of the overhead stuff, the bigger picture, but they very much were able to outsource 100% of that.
Nice.
Let's you mentioned the variety of sellers that you've worked with, so let's spend a little bit of time there, and thinking about that experience. What can you share as far as like most common mistakes that you've seen, since you've come across so many different kinds of sellers? What are some of the big ones that sellers make?
I would say number one is, and I hate that it's so stereotypical, I say it all the time, it's consistency. The difference between, there's many differences, but I'd say the one most common, the biggest reason that we see the larger clients we work with that are doing, 5-10 mil a year, versus the one who might be just trying to crack their first 100K, the biggest difference is the consistency in their sourcing. Because these smaller accounts in general, we see these big booms of like 100 unit shipment this week, 200 units next week, and then nothing on the shelf for 2 weeks. And then 50 units the next week, 150 the next week, and then a couple weeks of nothing. And then we end up looking at the math, and they're shipping the same amount of inventory every single month, which means you're generally going to be getting the same amount of sales. So if you're spending the same, let's call it 5K, if you're spending the same $5,000 every month in product, unless you're finding out a way to get better and better margins every month, you're going to get the same result back off the same spend. Versus the larger sellers, they are consistent every week, and they have down months, just the ebbs and flows of everything, especially coming out of summer. Obviously going into Q4, we're going to see this big boom. But if you look at the year as a whole, the larger sellers are just staying consistent. So if they're doing 300, 400, 500 unit shipments every week, I can guarantee that next week it's probably going to be the same amount of inventory coming in, or a little bit more, because these guys are consistent. That's the number one piece to this whole thing. The second piece is, all of this boils down to just how much capital you can pump into this machine. That is 99% of this. The other 1% is going to be your ability, your skill set to source. But there's enough programs and services and trainings and courses now that sourcing should not be the biggest issue for you. It's just how much capital can I pump into this machine? And that's honestly, we were just talking about this before we hit record, but the large sellers that you guys see showing the orange bars of 1 million, 5 mil, 10 mil, they're not ordering any secret products. They're not ordering any products that are that different. They're just pumping way more capital into this thing. So it's not necessarily a mistake, but it's a mindset thing. I see a lot of new sellers come in. They're like, man, I really want to get to that, my first 100,000, but they go on social media and compare themselves to all these orange bars floating around, these graphs and sales charts. It's like you are putting in a fraction of the amount of capital that these large sellers are, so you can't beat yourself up. And I can promise you, I see it on the floor right now. I can walk down there and show you all kinds of different large accounts that we're working with today. Being a Monday, it's the busy day. They're not ordering any secret products. In fact, a lot of them are ordering the same products, the same bundles, the same everything that the smaller sellers are doing. They're just getting a hold of way more volume. So that's ultimately the game that we're playing right here, is how, once you fine tune your ability to source and find product, then it's just a matter of how much capital I can pump into this beast.
Have you had any conversations with sellers and maybe like what holds, and I know we're stepping away a little bit here, but is it fear? Is it like, what keeps someone from pumping more capital into it when they know what they're doing? What keeps them from being consistent? Have you noticed any, I don't know, similarities as you talk to more and more sellers?
I think one of them is because we work with mostly, I'd say, newer sellers. People have been doing this less than 2 years, and they're hanging out at that 10K, 20K, 30K a month mark in sales. That's kind of the average seller we work with. So talking with quite a few of them, because I do one-on-one Zoom calls and different things like that with our clients if they need it. So I do have these conversations, and a lot of it in the last year has been fear-based. Obviously, Amazon's come out with all kinds of different craziness going on. They're throwing out Section 3s like it's candy. They're putting hard restrictions on all the major brands, especially the beauty stuff over the last year. And we were about 60% beauty at one point. So we saw a huge hit once they started, Clinique and Estee, and they started putting hard gate on those. We saw a huge hit. So we even had to work on some pivoting as well. But a lot of it was fear-based in the last year. People are not wanting to go all in and put all their eggs in one basket, especially with the Amazon one. So we see a lot of sellers right now actually diversifying over to the Walmart side. I'd say about 30-40% of our clientele right now that we're never selling on Walmart. Now they're actively shipping stuff here so we can do WFS shipments for them. So fear probably is the number one in the last year. Before that, it was more so, I think the main issue was, and I struggle with this for years, is just not knowing how to truly manage the cash flow. I personally struggled for years with, like a lot of newer sellers, we would order product, list it for the highest price we think we can get away with, and then we would just hold on for dear life and 6 months later hope it actually sells. So therefore, you're going to run out of cash very quickly, and then you're going to over leverage credit cards, lines of credit, all stuff I've done. I had made a lot of mistakes and got myself in some financial issues because of that back in the day. And so it took years for me to wrap my head around the cash flow part and start to really just focus on, I don't need an 80% ROI. I can be cool with 25, 30% and just flip it quicker. And then I'm able to not leverage the credit card as much, and I'm able to pay it on time and all these things. So I think managing the cash flow, the financial aspect, might be one of those other reasons some people aren't necessarily growing as much, because they max out their credit card and then they kind of have to just wait until that stuff sells. And then, some of it sells, they pay off the credit card a little bit, go max it out again. That's a cycle that's just a very dangerous place to be. And I think that might be one of the main reasons for newer sellers struggling.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think a lot of sellers, and Chris and I have talked about this at length. If it's not 30% ROI and not $3 profit, and I sell it for a dollar profit and a 10% ROI, I've failed. When in reality, if we think about it like compounding, can you imagine getting you put $100,000 into a bank account and you get 10% interest every single month over month? Like, everyone would do that.
Oh, yeah.
But if you do that in an Amazon business, people look down their nose at you.
Oh, yeah. I have so I do some day trading, just my own personal fun. And there's a video I watched of a day trader, and he had a question from this new trader that was talking about how much he's losing. And so the guy started diving into his story and his conversation, and he would ask him like, okay, on this one specific trade, as an example, were you up $50 at one point? He's like, well, yeah. Did you hold on to it too long, hoping you would get to 100 and then it tanked and you lost money? He's like, yeah, that's what happens. And the quote that he said was so great, and I can use it in the reselling space now, is no one ever went broke on green, which in day trading is, especially if you're using something like Robinhood, if you're making profit, all the graphs and stuff are green. If you're down, it's going to be red. So no one ever went broke cashing out on green. So it doesn't matter if you're making $1 profit, as long as you're doing that on all your products, you're making profit. It's not much, but over time that compound happens and you will win. So I've always loved bringing that phrase from the day trading world over to the reselling world. It's like, you're not going to go broke as long as you're making $1 profit. Is it a great profit? No, unless you're doing insane volume, but you sell some things at $1 profit or a loss, break even, and you learn from it. Don't buy that product again, or ask the questions around the product. Is what decisions around this purchase was the part that I didn't pay attention to as much. But as long as you're selling on green, you're never going to go broke.
I might have to steal that quote. I like it.
I wish I can quote who I heard. It was just a random years ago. It was like two or 3 years ago. Random person on YouTube. I heard that and it just stuck ever since. It's so good.
Yeah.
Especially in this space, we see way too many sellers just holding on for dear life to make a $3 profit instead of just taking your $1.50 and move on.
Mm-hmm.
Or the other end of it, you see a lot of the mentality now is like a lottery ticket, with crypto and stuff like that. It's dollar cost averaging, and sensible linear growth has no place in modern society anymore. If you're talking on social media, it's interesting. And and you even see a lot of sellers. Think about the marketing that you see. The gurus posting flashy watches and cars and stuff like that. They're just trying to cash out real quick and claim their lottery ticket by trying to sell a winning lottery ticket. And there's so much good and so much money to be made by simply running a good business, which is what your quote is getting at.
Yep. I mean, you look at any major corporate operation, they're running slim margins.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, especially, back in 2016, 17, Chris and I used to share bolos with each other back then. We'd be texting over each other at Ross, like, dude, you got to keep an eye out for this. And so we back then were, we can go find those double money products all the time. It was not that hard. It was a Wild West back then. We're in a day today where it's like, you got to be willing to take 10, 15, 20% for a lot of the bulk of your business. Sure, we're going to find some home runs during Q4 and different times like that. But as a seller, I am much more in the mindset these days, and especially helping grow our client accounts too, of just settle for a lower ROI. As long as that stuff is turning, you're getting your cash back quick, reinvest in, that thing's just going to compound over time. That's how all the big guys are doing it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So it's a more mature industry now. Like you said, you said the prep centers, there was no protocol at one point. You adapted based on your personal need and then your network needs. And you kind of grew that way. So in that sense, there's more infrastructure. So you don't need these home run flips anymore. You can run a linear, a more, a smaller margin, but it's more sustainable at the same time because it's more mature.
Yeah. And your business gets to be a lot more fun when it's predictable and you're not just wondering like, am I going to find enough double my money products to pay my rent next month? But if you have a business that becomes predictable, you can forecast your supplies, you can forecast your staff hours. It becomes a lot more fun when you're not stressing about trying to find the home runs.
So a lot of sellers are hesitant to relinquish control of their inventory to, a prep center, to a third party. And so I got a little bit of a twofer here. One, there are some people who are like, oh, well, I'm just giving up leads, to my prep center. Like every prep center sells on Amazon. But the other thing is they worry about quality control when they're not the ones who physically handle the products. Can you speak a little bit to that, both of those points? I'm giving a lead, to a competitor, and they're going to break everything they touch. What do you tell people?
First is it's a very fair thought process because Chris and I, we've seen this. We've seen both sides of that story, and especially as a prep center, we oftentimes will get the customer returns or even sometimes removal orders like, hey, I used another prep center, I want to use you guys, I'm going to do a recall because I had a complaint about how this thing was prepped. We've seen nasty big black labels put over prices instead of just taking the tag off. We've seen, like the eyeshadow palettes, the compressed powders. We always bubble wrap and polybag those. We've seen those come with just stickers on them and they're just demolished. So it's a very fair question, or I should say concern, about the quality of prep. That's ultimately going to come down to your interviewing process with your prep center. We're very transparent and open. And so I tell people, like, I've personally been selling for almost 9 years, and I very much have trained my team exactly how I prep myself. So it's almost like this double-edged sword where there's pros and cons to the prep center owner being a seller, because a lot of people have the fear of them stealing the products, which is a fair concern. And the second is it's actually a big benefit for the owner to have at least been a seller before, because we have a higher standard than if we just come in. I've actually seen people that will buy a prep center that have never sold a thing in their life. And then they run in as a new owner and try to train their staff on how to prep things. It's like you've not been in the trenches of the Amazon space and the different policies and procedures that need to be taught there. So the quality control is a very, very big concern, more so than the stealing leads thing. I tell people with the stealing leads portion, you're more than welcome to go scour my storefront if you'd like. Most of us have built such a good reputation in this space. I can promise you we have no desire to go ruin that reputation to make a few $1,000s. So I think and this is why I like our setup with the fact that I can proudly say I'm one of the few prep center owners that has an active social media account. I've been posting videos for years. You can literally get a bird's eye view on our own journey, our own story, and the growth of the prep center. So that's a very big benefit, is if the prep center you're looking at working with, they're active on social media, they have their own Instagram page or something like that, where you can physically see inside the warehouse, the operation. It gives you a little bit of peace of mind if you can see that. Because if you blindly just let go of your inventory to this random address in the middle of nowhere, it's a very big concern. And I've even gone as far as people who are very hesitant, I've actually taken videos of their shipment being done so they can see, here's how we unbox it, here's how it's sorted, it's prepped, here's how we do our prep, and then it's boxed and it's on the UPS trailer that's left here. So I've done that quite a few times. We actually have implemented something now where a client's first shipment with us, you'll be sent an overhead photo of all your product when it's unboxed and sorted on the table. And then you'll be sent another photo when it's prepped, and then a third photo of the actual finished boxes. If it's me, you'll usually see a thumbs up in that photo, like, hey, it's done. So we try to document a lot more these days for the clients, just to give them some true peace of mind of that.
Thank you for listening to the Clear the Shelf podcast. My magnanimous co-host Chris Racic has put together a gift for you for being a listener. It's called the Monthly Goal Tracking Spreadsheet, and it's free. The spreadsheet will help you break down and track how much you've purchased, which should be a leading indicator of how much you will sell, and then you'll be able to track how much you've sold, as well as your estimated monthly profit on a daily basis. This will all feed into the daily averages, so you can ensure that you're on track to meet your goals each and every month. Grab it for free today over at cleartheshelf.com/goal-tracking. Thanks again for being a listener. Now back to the show. Yeah, I think people forget how quickly and easily you can ruin a reputation just by it's not worth it long term. And I know some people have done it, but I think it happens a lot less frequently than people would like to make it seem.
Exactly.
So you mentioned the documentation process, and speaking of documentation, you also mentioned Section 3s, and there's a lot of fear out there around. And this is actually a recent objection that I read in one of the groups that we're in. Chris, I think it was your school group. The concern is, what if I need documentation, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if I'm doing OA, I have an order confirmation, I have shipping confirmation, but sometimes they're just emails. Sometimes they don't have a homepage on the source's website. So I might need the packing slip, or I might need other things from the actual shipment, but I've sent that to you in Oregon. So how would you address that concern? And then the second part of that is, I've also heard people have a concern that their shipping address isn't their business address, and it's not going to match what Amazon has on file. So as a whole, in the realm of collecting data to prove whatever Amazon wants you to prove, how would you address those concerns?
Yeah, so the benefit is Amazon is very aware that 3PLs exist, and a lot of sellers utilize them. So there's no real red flag as a prep center there. The packing slips are obviously more and more becoming needed. We used to just toss them, and we always ask the client first, like, do you want to keep them or toss them? Most people were tossing because emails were fine. Now Amazon's gotten into this habit of like, well, we need a physical photo of a physical copy of a piece of paper. So now what we do is we store all packing slips, and every client has a personal box, which is just a small U-Haul box on their shelf. And between random samples or gifts that come with orders and then the packing slips, once that box gets full, or at the client's request, we actually ship that to them. So they now have access to all their packing slips. There's been instances where somebody gets hit with something and they need it immediately, so we can go dig through those packing slips and get a photo of whatever they're looking for. We've done that several times. So that's usually the best way that we've been able to do that, is just save the packing slips. And then if it's every 2 weeks or every 4 weeks at their request, we can ship that over to them. For the Section 3s are getting thrown around recently, it's not uncommon where they are going to want verification of anyone who has access via user permissions in your account. So as a prep center, we have a prep center contract, which we pop the client name on there, the storefront too. And then that's what they give to Amazon to verify. Proof of payment is another one that they've been requesting lately. So with our invoices, you can just screenshot your QuickBooks invoice, which has our header and our information, different things like that. So yeah, they're definitely tightening up the reins on needing proof of pretty much everything. And the user permissions one has just been going on these last few months.
But it's all pretty straightforward from your experience of gathering stuff.
They're usually doing recently they'll just do a verification Zoom call, and they're just verifying that you have legit sources, legit products, and you're using a legit company to handle your fulfillment.
We would not be doing anybody any favors if we didn't talk about some of the drawbacks or even challenges that there are when using a prep center.
Yeah.
And so, got to bring it up. What are some of the drawbacks? What are some of the challenges that you've seen when a seller uses a prep center? And are there any ways to kind of mitigate those issues before they even crop up?
The big one is going to be the lag time is probably the number one, especially with online arbitrage. If you've got seasonal things that need to get in ASAP, if you've got the hot toy of the year that you need to flip ASAP, prep center is probably not going to be the best bet, because you have shipping time here, which let's call it 3 to 5 days. Once it gets here, it's probably sitting on the shelf for a few days waiting for your shipping day, and then it gets shipped from us. Our big locations we ship to are usually down in Cali. Of course, now they split it 5, 6 different ways, but it used to just all be SMF down in Cali. Now it's splitting off, usually West Coast. So there is you got to plan for at least 3 to 5 extra days of lag time. So if you have those products you need to flip very quickly, it's better to do it yourself so you can get a hold of those quickly. The other thing that we've done to help resolve that issue is, if it is something they need to flip quickly, we can actually list it as merchant fulfilled first. Then when their shipping day gets here, we can send it FBA if it didn't sell already. So that's one resolution that we came up with in order to do that. And that could be, we've had instances where it's seller fulfilled on Walmart and on Amazon as well. And then recently we started doing eBay for some clients as well. So we're able to kind of cross post a lot of that stuff. So that's one big issue that we face, and one way that we're able to help resolve that a bit.
Do you do anything with returns? Will you help a seller with returns too?
We tested this. There's a reason no one does it. So and I'm an open book for whatever anyone wants to know about this stuff. But so in Texas, we were trying out pivoting, because we found out very quickly we couldn't copy an online arbitrage prep center model in a sales tax state like Texas. We did not have nearly the volume we thought we would be getting down there with the online side. Come to find out, it's because nobody wanted to do the reimbursements, and they weren't willing to find those loopholes. So we did test out some different methods, which is a full scale eBay service where they can actually have their returns sent to us. We'll take the photos, list it on their eBay account for them, and then handle the shipping as well. Unless we're charging a very high per unit fee, it just did not pan out at all. It was very, very much the most time sucking work that we could have done, because you have to take the photos, do the listing. When it ships, we have to ship it. So we're looking at 3 major steps involved with one small product. So we can't charge $1, $2, $3. We had to come up with a much higher fee. So that didn't necessarily work out for us. Here, we don't advertise openly like, yeah, send us all of your returns, especially for beauty sellers. Most beauty stuff has been used, and you cannot go and resell that pretty much anywhere. So we ran into a lot of issues with it. So we did cut that service off completely. If it's random stuff that's been pulled, it's still brand new, we can oftentimes ship it back in. With the recent attention over on the Walmart side, we've actually been having quite a few people do Amazon returns to us, and then we're listing it and shipping it over on the Walmart side. So we have people starting to pull their inventory out and then ship it on a different platform. But yeah, for the most part, as long as they're just natural trickle-in returns, we can cross-check them, make sure they're not used. They can be shipped back in. If not, then the client has a choice. If they want to pay the eBay fee, we can eBay it for them. Or if they want to just put in their personal box, and when that personal box is full, we ship it over to them.
I want to talk about merchant fulfilled
Mhm.
a little bit. I think Chris predicted, and I think he's spot on that merchant fulfilled is going to be a key uh, function this Q4,
Yes.
especially with some unresolved hints that Amazon's put out about their
Mhm.
fulfillment centers and how open they'll be and how available. So, can you walk me through that process? What does FBM using a prep center look like from a to a seller?
Yeah, it can work a few different ways. Either the prep center can list the product for you, or most of us will have some type of shared spreadsheet. So on there will be quantity ordered. When we receive it on quantity received, we can mark how many units that are. So if you ordered 5 and we got 3 of them, then that triggers you to see, hey, they have 3 of them on hand. So let me go ahead and list that seller fulfilled. And then we just have a simple little order ticket that we came up with. We work with between 60 and 80 different clients. So we can't physically go into 80 different seller centrals every day and check for sales. So it's easier if the client notifies us. But to make sure it doesn't get lost in Slack, we have a simple order form where they just pop in their name and platform. So if you, for example, had an order on Amazon FBM, you would just pop in that form and say, Chris, Amazon. That triggers me. It doesn't matter if there's 1 sale or 10. That triggers me, or at least we have a trained staff that does this every day now. That triggers me to go check your account and then ship out anything that's been listed or orders for that day. So very simple business model that we came up with on that side. And then that's all separated out. So we have technically 2 buildings and they're connected by a man door. So our second building we dedicated towards the FBM side now that that's growing. So we have a separate shelf. So it's separated from the FBA side as well.
With the new rules on OTDR,
Mhm.
what kind of changes has that caused with your business and the merchant fulfilled side?
It caused me to need to hire someone. Traditionally, we were telling clients, like, if you can give us a 3-day handling time, that's amazing because somebody on the floor, their number one job every day is pump out as many FBA shipments as you can. That's how we get paid as a prep center. So to have somebody take time away from the tables to go out and check seller fulfilled order stuff, do the shipping there. We do charge a little bit extra versus an FBA because we're using our own Uline boxes and different things like that. And it's just a little bit more time consuming. So the changes we had to made with this new one where they want things, was it 90% is the minimum now?
Mhm.
And that starts, did that already start or does that start tomorrow?
September 15th, I think.
Oh, okay. So yeah, that was 2 weeks ago. There's something new that starts, I saw on 30th or the 1st. I'll have to look that up.
Yeah.
So yeah, we did hire someone specifically just for FBM now. So their only job is to come in, handle those orders, and then help the team out with the rest of the day. So hiring a dedicated person, now we don't need 3-day handling time. We were normally shipping every other day where our manager Jamie would hop out there and do that. But now she doesn't. Again, this gets into like the buying back your time methodology. So Jamie was spending time doing that, which she gets paid way too much to be handling that. She needs to go do the type of work she's paid to do, right? And so we ended up hiring somebody. So now we're doing orders every single day, sometimes multiple times a day.
Mhm.
They'll come in at 9, hammer out the first couple hours on just FBM stuff, and then they'll check it again around 2:33, because that's right before the post office is getting ready to shut down for the day. We're in a super tiny town, so our post office closes early every day, which is super fun. But we'll usually check it twice a day, is what I'm trying to get us to be consistent with. But at least once a day, every morning, those orders are going out on time. And then once it's out of our hands, you all know how this goes. Post office sometimes is losing packages. They're doing late deliveries, so that's going to show on our metrics, or the seller metrics at least. But as far as us as a prep center, we are shipping on a daily basis.
I recently shipped something via the US Postal Service priority mail. Okay. And it went from Florida. It was going from Florida to I was shipping something to Chris. It went from Florida to Cincinnati and then to Indiana, back to Cincinnati. I think it went to Indiana one more time,
Oh my
and then
gosh.
it got routed to, apparently, in Chris's town, which is not a huge town. There's more than one U.S. Postal Service facility, and so it spent some time in both of those, and then a post office. It was It was the craziest routing I've ever seen for a
Mhm.
product.
And the sad part is that's going to ding your metric if you're selling an FBA item and it does that. And there's
Yeah.
not much we can do about it.
Fortunately, I mean, well, we'll see how the
Yeah.
protection works with Amazon. But
Yeah.
uh, do you guys foresee being able to handle a significant increase in FBM this Q4 in 2024?
Yes, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Last year, we never offered it per se, but if clients asked, yeah, we can do it. And that was just a couple orders a day. It was nothing volume. This year, we specifically planned for it, especially when Amazon came out and they said, hey, if you want your inventory ready, you have to ship it in by what, October 15th.
Yeah.
By what? It's always been late November, right? If it's in by Black Friday, you're good. The fact that they're telling us October is just already showing they're probably already behind,
Yeah.
which makes me a little scared. But we're also just pre-planning. So we did hire somebody that's full time. I'm actually training him today to take over that entire role. Nice part when I come into town is I can take over those types of roles, no problem. But again, I'm the owner. I should be focusing on other things, bigger picture stuff.
Mhm.
So he's coming in today, getting him all trained up, and then he's going to be good to go to handle his orders Monday through Friday. So we specifically are hiring him on, and he's going to be an absolute rock star. He was working back end at Walmart for managing the inventory of the entire store, and he's going
Nice.
full time from there. Put in his 2 weeks, and he's coming to us. So I've got a nice addition to the team there. So he's very familiar with handling e-commerce orders on a daily and doing some volume. So we feel very, very confident with making FBM a big portion of it this year.
Good. Yeah, that's
And
gonna.
not
I think
just
it'll
that
be
too,
good.
I'm actively trying to get clients to at least get in Walmart account as well. Because as we all know this is going to keep happening. Everyone freaks out when there's a new restriction on a brand. It's like they've proven a track record for the last 8 years I've been doing this that it's going to get more and more difficult every single year. So I'm trying to get more and more people to at least get a Walmart account up and running. I know you've done some Walmart episodes as well. So
Mhm.
people can go back and watch those and deep dive the Walmart side. But I'm telling you, there is a huge opportunity that is sitting right there for a lot of people when you get restricted in these brands. Now you have another opportunity for now to at least liquidate and get rid of that stuff or even make a profit because there's a fraction of the amount of sellers over there. The stat that came out was there's 1 million Amazon sellers and 150,000 Walmart sellers.
Mhm.
So that means far less competition. There's only 3, maybe 5 people on most of the listings that I sell on. Versus that same listing on Amazon is going to have 20 or 30 people.
Interesting.
So more and more, especially going into Q4 with FBM, I'm also trying to get people to list SF, which is seller fulfilled, the same thing, just different term, on Walmart as well, so we can have that cross listed.
Nice. I'm curious if you've got like maybe a favorite story about how maybe an arbitrage seller has grown their business or has maybe gotten time back by working with you as a partner in their prep.
There's 2. The first one I brought up earlier, the clients that I did their first shipment, they eventually trusted us enough after seeing like, oh, they don't mess up the products, they prep it right, they're not stealing it, it's not going missing all the time. Once they fully trusted us, and then we had a conversation of, hey, we want to go overseas for a year, but we want to give you all of the product. They were only shipping about half of it at that time. And so we had that conversation and they up and left for a year over there. So when we did their shipments, we'd message them during the daytime. And at the time, I was the one leading those shipments. So I'd message them during the daytime, hey, getting started on your shipment, let you know if I have any questions. But of course, being overseas, they didn't answer till the nighttime. And I would constantly ask them for updates. Oh, we were in Rome on this day. We went over to Italy for this week. And I'm like, that for me was the coolest because it showed proof of it was proof of the whole idea of this prep center. We didn't start a prep center because we love prepping or it's fun. Nobody likes the shipping. We
Mhm.
started this whole thing on the premise that we want to help Amazon sellers get their space and their time back. So that not only got their space and their time back, but they went and utilized it for some big life dream that they had, which is spending an entire year in these different countries. And they didn't even have to worry about their shipping going on. They still ran an active business that not only ran, it grew over time. It went from 50K for the first year, and then they ended up doing 7 figures a couple years down the road with us. So that hands down, results wise, was one of my favorites. The second one is less financially driven as far as the result goes, but it hit home just because I have kids. So I've got a 9 and a 5-year-old, and I very much have went through the hustle mode mentalities like most of us do at some point, where we're doing the 12-hour days. As a parent, I was not mentally there for a while because it was just prep and ship, source all day. Retail arbitrage is my bread and butter, always has been. So I was doing these 10-hour sourcing days, shipping at night. It was just, I was very, very inactive as a husband and a father. And when we brought on one client in particular, came on as a single mom with 3 kids, and she was capped. She was doing like 500 units a month by herself out of her garage, the typical story. And she was very worried about coming on with a prep center because of those common issues we hear about. Like, I have a lot of fear around the prep center stealing my leads or sharing them off to somebody else. Sadly, I've heard stories of prep centers that will save the data and then sell it as a leads list. Like, there's shady stuff that goes on. So they were all legit concerns. And I did a video for her, and I showed her like, hey, I'm just going to show you the warehouse. I'm going to show you when your shipment is being worked on. You can meet the person working on your shipment on video, and then able to show her the whole step. And she's like, okay, I'm comfortable scaling this thing up. And she got to the point where we ended up taking 100% of her inventory, and she gets to just hang with her kids and do homeschooling stuff now. Versus before, she was trying to manage all of the personal side with the shipping side, which at the time, I think she was 15 hours a week on her shipping. And that for me is a deeper level success story than some of the financially driven result ones, because as a parent, like, you know how this goes. When you can cut something out of your life that gives you your time back to like be present with your kids, like the fact that, like, the moment that hit me home most is when we got rid of the Texas warehouse, and all of a sudden we were eating dinner as a family in the kitchen together at 5:30, 6 o'clock. That was huge for us because we haven't been doing that for years. And so when I hear success stories of our clients, they're like, hey, I know it doesn't sound like much, but like, I was able to make it to my kids' soccer practice and not have someone else take them. That for me will win any success story right there.
Awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not popular in hustle culture, but
No.
that's what you can also do. Like,
Mhm.
you don't necessarily have to expand your business, and free up yourself for other business activities. You can free yourself up for the other part of your life. It's
100%.
and I think a lot of people, I hope that resonates with a lot of people, because that's when I left, because as soon as I left, I never missed one of my son's basketball games, and
Mhm.
it's, just taking your time back, for your personal and your family. That's a pretty high ROI. So,
It is.
yeah. Hey, so you mentioned Michael Gerber's excellent book, E-Myth.
Mhm.
It's a whole series for anyone that's not familiar with it. What are you reading now? Can you turn us on to any recent good books, blogs, or
Not just
podcasts,
book,
or whatever?
YouTube channel. I don't know how I've never heard of this guy. So his name is Dan Martell.
Oh, yep. Buy back your time.
I don't know. So that's the book I just started yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how I've never heard of this guy. And I actually stumbled into, he did a fitness transformation. That's the video I started watching because it was a before and after of a CEO that underwent this visible abs transformation was his video. And there's so much good information. For the first time ever, I've never, and I know some of you will understand this, I've never looked up to another CEO in a way of like, hey, I can personally see myself walking those shoes. This was the first guy that I felt like had the same personality type, and he's in a position I can see myself being in 10 years. So when I saw that fitness transformation video, I'm like, oh, he did amazing, lost, however much weight. And then I was like, who is this guy? Because he's obviously a CEO of something, and he talks on a different level than most people. And so I clicked through his profile. That's when I saw Buy Back Your Time as the book that he wrote. And I'm like, let me check him out first before I order anything. I deep dove hours and hours and hours. It's all I listened to over these last like 4 weeks since I stumbled into him. And he gets on and does these not necessarily podcasts, but it's a podcast vibe. And he has his video guy just spitting the client and different customer messages at him, and he'll just start spitting off like life advice that hits home for me so much. It's the same level of thinking that I've always had. I'm like, this is another human doing 10x what I'm doing, and that was the first time I felt that drawn to somebody to go follow their footsteps and really hone in. So I bought the book, started it yesterday, which is Buy Back Your Time. And he runs, I mean, tens of millions of dollars in different businesses that he's involved with now. Went from typical story, like drug addict at 17, went into rehab, came out and started two businesses that failed. Third one took off. He sold it and just ran with it. And his whole premise is he is a CEO. He acts like it, which means he's buying back his time every chance he gets. And visually on those YouTube videos, he'll break down how he does everything and the different roles that he outsources to. And it's just everything about him hit home with me. So I'm very much, he's all I'm listening to right now. I've taken a lot of really good mental stuff out of that.
Nice. I'll have to check that out. I didn't know he had a YouTube channel. I've read his book, but
yeah.
I'll have to check that out.
Yeah, no, I usually don't buy books randomly anymore. It's like I want to go see if I can find who this person is. If I like them as a person, I'm like, good chance I'm gonna get something out of the book. Yeah. Definitely take a deep dive off that one.
I'll do that. How can people learn more about you? How can they learn more about Network Prep? How can someone who wants to sign up as a client to Network Prep?
Yeah, so you can find us. We kind of have two different businesses per se. So us as sellers, we've documented our entire journey since the garage days. Everything's been put up on YouTube for the last almost 9 years. So we have videos. Literally, our boy who's 9 now, he was a year old, and you can see him in the garage playing with stuff as I'm prepping. We've done vlogs, we've done tutorial videos, step by steps. So that's all over on the YouTube side at Side Hustle Network. Same thing with Instagram, the Side Hustle Network, and then the Network Prep side. I haven't been super active on it, but I am getting better on the Instagram page specifically for Network Prep. That one's Network Prep Center on Instagram. And then you can go to networkprep.com. We just recently updated the whole website. Shout out to Chris, because I was bugging him with tons of questions on that site. So built that one myself, and that has all the information you can possibly want. I'm a big fan of just being transparent up front and not doing back and forth in the emails just to find out they're not interested. So pricing, policies, procedures, our TOS, if you will, everything's up on the site. If everything looks good there and you want to get on board, you can email us directly, info@networkprep.com. That goes to my personal inbox. I still filter and communicate with all potential new clients, make sure that we're going to be a right fit for each other. And then also being the clear the shelf referral, you'll actually get your first 250 units absolutely free, as well as the $99 sign-up fee waived. So nice. Pretty sweet setup.
Yeah, absolutely. I will give my full-throated endorsement to Network Prep. It is you guys have been great partners for me and a good friend, even more importantly over the years, man. So make sure if nothing else, you at least go follow Chaz on social media. And if you're going to hire a prep center, partner with a prep center, I can't recommend anyone higher. So
much appreciated.
We always end with a quote of the week, and Chris actually found this one for us this week, but comes from George Soros. It is much easier to put existing resources to better use than to develop resources where they do not exist. That one is I don't know. That one kind of hits home. We've got a lot of resources at our disposal already, but we don't always put them to the best use. And so I think that's a pretty great quote to end the week. All right. That's the pod, guys. We'll see you guys next week. Thanks for listening to Clear the Shelf with Chris and Chris. If you enjoyed this episode, please take a screenshot on your phone and share it to Facebook, Instagram, or your favorite FBA group, and be sure to tag me and let me know why you liked it and what you'd like to hear more from us in the future. Also, I'd like to give you some free gifts for listening. Head over to rabbittrailchallenge.com and repricerchallenge.com for some free courses to further your business. Thanks for listening.